He was a young millionaire, lying lifeless in a coma after a tragic accident. For years, doctors gave up hope, but one nurse refused to leave his side. Day after day, she washed his chest, cleaned his wounds, and whispered prayers only his heart could hear. No one knew that her gentle touch would awaken the soul he had hidden inside. Stay till the end, because this story will melt your heart and prove that true love can heal even the deepest silence. The night was heavy with silence. The hospital hallways stood empty, long corridors stretching into shadows, broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Helen Mia, just 27, walked those hallways with slow, steady steps, her white nurse shoes whispering against the polished floor. She had worked here for 3 years, but nights like this still weighed on her chest. Her heart always pulled her toward one room, room 304. It was not an ordinary room. Behind that door lay a man everyone spoke of in hushed tones, a man surrounded by mystery, power, and wealth. Smith William, the billionaire who once ruled boardrooms, who commanded respect with a single glance, who built empires from nothing. Now he lay in silence, his body still, his future uncertain. He was only 35, in the prime of his life, yet a single tragic accident had stolen his voice, his movement, his world. Machines breathed with him, monitors blinked for him, but his eyes never opened. Other nurses feared the room, not because of ghosts, but because of the weight it carried. They whispered, "What if he wakes? What if his powerful family blames us for the smallest mistake? What if he never wakes at all?" But Helen was different. She didn't see a billionaire. She didn't see wealth or headlines or the shadow of power that lingered in the air. She saw a man who deserved dignity, even in silence. That night she gathered her supplies, warm water in a silver bowl, soft towels, gentle soap. Her fingers trembled as she carried them, but not from fear, from something she couldn't explain. When she stepped inside room 304, the sound of the machines greeted her first. Beep, beep, steady, slow. The rhythm of life, fragile yet stubborn. Smith lay there, tall and broad, his face still handsome even in sleep. The accident had not broken his strong features, only locked them away behind closed eyelids. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, each one a silent battle. Helen placed the bowl on the small table, dipped the towel into warm water, and wrung it out with care. Her hands brushed against the soft fabric, and she whispered to herself, "Even if he cannot feel, he deserves care. He deserves to be treated as if he will wake tomorrow." Her voice trembled, but her heart stood firm. She pressed the towel gently against his cheek. The warmth spread, melting away the coldness that lingered on his skin. She moved to his forehead, wiping slowly, as if each touch could remind him that he was not forgotten. Her eyes softened, tracing the sharp lines of his face. For a moment, she wondered what his eyes looked like. Were they piercing? Were they kind? Her hand slid to his arm, carefully wiping each finger, each knuckle. She paused, feeling the strength hidden beneath still muscles. A man who once signed deals worth millions now lay powerless under her care. Helen's heart squeezed. Not from pity, but from something gentler, something deeper. A connection she couldn't name. She moved to his chest, careful not to disturb the wires. The towel pressed against his skin, warm against the cool air of the room. Her hand shook slightly. Not from fear, but from the strange intimacy of caring for someone who could not even say her name. Her breaths quickened. Why did she feel this way? Why did this man, silent and still, stir something inside her heart? She brushed the towel gently across his collarbone, then paused. For a second, she swore she felt his chest rise faster. She froze, eyes fixed on his face. Nothing. Only silence. Only the steady beep of the machine. "Maybe I'm imagining things," she whispered, forcing herself to continue. She dipped the towel again, wrung it out, and carefully placed it against his hand. Her fingers brushed his, soft and steady. And then his finger twitched. Helen gasped. Her heart leapt into her throat. "No, no, it can't be," she whispered, her voice breaking the stillness. She leaned closer, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her own pulse pounded louder than the beeping machines. Had she just imagined it? Or had the billionaire in silence really moved? Her trembling hand brushed his again. And that was when something even stranger happened. His finger curled, faint but real, around hers. The silent room was no longer silent. Something had begun. The towel was still warm in her hand. Helen pressed it softly against his palm, just as she had done so many times before. But tonight, something felt different. A tiny shiver ran through her fingertips. She blinked, thinking it was her imagination, but no. His fingers had twitched. Her breath caught in her throat. "No, maybe I imagined it," she whispered, almost afraid to hope. Her heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out the soft beeping of the monitor. Was it a reflex? Just the body playing tricks? Or was something greater happening before her eyes? Her hand hovered above his. She hesitated for a moment, then bravely brushed the towel against his skin again. This time there was no mistake. His finger moved again, stronger, deliberate. Helen gasped as his finger curled faintly around hers. The contact was weak, fragile, but undeniably real. Her knees almost buckled. The billionaire, silent for months, had touched her back. Her lips trembled as she leaned closer. "Mr. William, can you hear me? Can you feel me?" Her voice shook, but she spoke with all the courage in her soul. There was no reply. Only the soft rhythm of the machines, steady and calm, as though mocking her desperate hope. Helen bit her lip, refusing to let despair win. If his body had moved even the slightest, it meant there was life. And where there was life, there was hope. She placed the towel aside and carefully wrapped her fingers around his hand, holding it tightly. "Listen to me," she whispered, her voice low and tender. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I believe you can. And if you can, don't be afraid. You're safe. You're not alone." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop speaking. She began to tell him stories, soft and simple, as if her voice alone could guide him back from the darkness. She told him about the garden outside the hospital, where small white flowers were blooming despite the cold nights. She described how the other nurses laughed in the hallways, how sometimes she pretended to laugh with them but always returned here, to his side. She even whispered about her own loneliness, the nights when the world felt heavy and quiet, the nights when she wondered if anyone noticed her heart. Her voice cracked as she leaned closer. "I stayed, Mr. William. Even when others were afraid to come near you, I stayed. Because I believe you will come back." The machines continued their steady song, but then a faint change. A stir. Helen's eyes widened as she noticed his lips parting ever so slightly. Her breath hitched. She leaned forward, close enough to feel the whisper of his breath. And then it happened. A faint, broken sound slipped into the air. A whisper, weak yet undeniable. "Where am I?" Helen's heart stopped. Her entire body froze, the towel slipping from her fingers. For months he had been silent, motionless, a man trapped between life and death. And now he had spoken. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. The billionaire in a coma had spoken his first words to her. Her heart whispered one truth she dared not say aloud. She had been waiting for this moment. And perhaps, deep in his silence, he had been waiting for her. Helen's knees buckled beneath her. Her body wanted to collapse, but her heart refused to let her. She steadied herself on the edge of the bed, trembling. "You're in the hospital, Mr. William," she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. "You've been asleep for a long time." For a moment, silence hung heavy again. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, terrified that perhaps she had only imagined it, that maybe his whisper had been nothing more than air escaping. But then his eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, as if pushing through layers of shadows, Smith William forced his eyes open. Helen gasped. Blue. Deep, piercing blue eyes stared up at her. Not dull, not lifeless, searching, questioning, alive. Her throat tightened. Those eyes, the ones hidden from the world for months, now held her in their gaze. And for him, she was the very first face he had seen since falling into darkness. His lips parted, his voice cracked, weak but certain. "You..." The word alone carried weight. It was not confusion, it was recognition. His gaze lingered on her face as if he had always known it, as if her voice had been guiding him back all along. "You stayed," he whispered, his words broken but clear. Helen's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her throat burned as tears welled in her eyes. Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak through the flood of emotions. "Yes," she breathed, nodding quickly. "Every night. I never left you." Her voice broke, but she didn't care. Her truth was out now, simple, raw, honest. A tear slid down her cheek, and for the first time in months, Smith's eyes followed movement. He saw her tears. He saw the truth in her trembling smile. He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him. The effort made him groan in weakness, his muscles refusing to obey. "Don't push yourself," Helen said quickly, sliding her arms under his shoulders. Her touch was firm yet gentle, lifting him with all the strength her slender frame could offer. For the first time, she felt the real weight of him. He was no longer just a patient lying still. He was a man, heavy, alive, breathing against her. Smith leaned into her support, his head falling slightly closer to hers. Her hair brushed against his cheek, soft, carrying the faint scent of lavender. For a moment, his chest tightened with something he couldn't name. Helen's hands trembled as she held him upright, but she didn't let go. The closeness was overwhelming, the intimacy of carrying someone back to life with her arms. His breath brushed against her skin, weak but steady. Their eyes met again, blue locking with brown. The world outside vanished. There were no machines, no corridors, no sterile walls, only two souls rediscovering life in each other's presence. In that fragile, unspoken silence, something passed between them, something invisible yet stronger than chains. A bond, delicate yet unbreakable, born not from words but from the endless nights she had spent whispering to him, touching his hand, refusing to leave. Smith's lips curved, not into a smile but into something more fragile, gratitude, wonder, and awe. His voice, still weak, carried his truth. "You brought me back." Helen's chest heaved as she blinked through her tears. Her heart knew it too. Whatever force had pulled him from the shadows, it had been guided by her care, her voice, her faith. For the first time since his accident, Smith William was not alone. And for the first time in her life, Helen realized she was holding more than just a patient. She was holding destiny itself. The days slowly turned into weeks. Smith's body, once frail and still, began to regain its strength. Each morning he managed to sit up longer. Each evening his hands grew steadier. But though his body healed, something within him remained broken. Helen noticed it in the way his eyes lingered on the ceiling when he thought no one was watching. She noticed the heavy silence that wrapped around him long after the nurses left. Every time she entered, tray in hand or towel folded neatly, she found him the same way, still staring upward, as though the ceiling held secrets only he could see. One evening, as the moonlight spilled through the blinds, she finally broke the silence. "Your body grows stronger each day, Mr. William," she whispered, adjusting his blanket. But he didn't respond. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on nothing. Finally, after what felt like hours, his voice broke the air. "I lost everything." Helen froze, her hands pausing mid-motion. His voice was calm, but beneath it she heard the storm. "My friends, my fiancé, they never came," he continued, each word dragging with weight. "When I was strong, when I was the man who built towers and signed checks worth millions, I mattered. But when I fell—" He swallowed, his throat tight, his voice shaking with unspoken pain. "They vanished. Every single one. No phone calls, no visits, just silence. I wasn't a man to them. I was a fortune. And when the fortune slept, so did their loyalty." Helen's chest ached. She wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him he was wrong. But she held back, her fingers curling into her lap. The man before her was not just recovering from a coma. He was recovering from betrayal. His eyes glistened faintly, though he quickly turned his face away. "I was only valuable when I was untouchable," he said bitterly. "Now I am weak, and weak men are left behind." The room was heavy with silence, but Helen couldn't let it remain. Her heart pushed her forward, her voice trembling but true. "You're not alone," she whispered. His eyes snapped toward her as if her words had broken through a wall he had built. Her voice grew steadier, braver with each word. "I'm here. Not because you're rich, not because of your skyscrapers or your cars or the name the world whispers with envy." She took a breath, fighting her own tears. "I'm here because you're human, because you breathe, because you feel, because you matter." Her words were simple, no grand speeches, no polished phrases, but they struck him deeper than any business deal, deeper than any promise of wealth. For a man who had once owned everything, this, being seen as a man and not a fortune, was the rarest treasure of all. Smith's throat tightened. For the first time since waking, his eyes softened, no longer sharp with pain. He studied her face, the quiet conviction in her gaze, the way her hands trembled but didn't falter. And in that moment, Smith William, the billionaire who had once believed himself untouchable, realized something that humbled him completely. This woman, this nurse, saw him as no one else ever had. Not as a title, not as power, not as money, but as a soul in need of love. For the first time in years, his chest loosened. The weight of loneliness, though not gone, felt lighter. Because someone had chosen to stay. The evening air was hushed. The blinds let in only a sliver of fading light, painting long shadows across the walls. The quiet hum of machines filled the room, steady but distant, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Helen sat at the edge of his bed, her hands steady though her heart trembled. She dipped the towel into warm water, wrung it gently, and pressed it against his forehead. It was the same routine she had done countless times before. Yet tonight, the silence between them felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Her touch was careful, tender, almost reverent. Each stroke across his skin carried a quiet message she never dared to say aloud. She thought he didn't notice, but he did. As she leaned closer to wash his cheek, his hand suddenly shot up. Not weak this time, not trembling, but firm. His fingers closed around her wrist. Helen froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart pounded violently, louder than the machines, louder than reason. Her eyes flickered to his, blue, piercing, burning with an intensity that startled her. "Don't go," he whispered. His voice was low but sharp with emotion, almost desperate. Helen's lips parted, trembling. "Mr. William," she began, her tone half protest, half confusion. But he stopped her, his voice firmer. "Call me Smith." The way he said it, it wasn't just a request. It was a plea, a need to strip away the walls of wealth, of status, of distance. He wanted to be a man in her presence, nothing more, nothing less. Her chest tightened as she whispered, "Smith." The name felt fragile on her lips, yet intimate, as though it belonged only to her. His grip softened, but he did not let go. Instead, he looked into her eyes with a rawness that stripped away every mask he had ever worn. "Do you know the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes after months of darkness?" Helen shook her head, unable to speak. "You," he said, his voice breaking. "Not the doctors, not my family, not the people who claimed to care. It was you, your face, your voice, your touch. You brought me back to life, Helen." Her throat tightened, tears rising before she could stop them. Her entire world seemed to spin. She had never expected such words from him, from anyone. I only did my duty," she whispered shakily, her heart pounding with confusion. But he shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "No," he whispered fiercely, pulling her wrist gently until her palm rested against his chest. His heartbeat thudded beneath her hand, steady, alive, real. "You gave me more than duty. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to fight my way back from the darkness." Helen's eyes blurred with tears. Her hand trembled against his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heart. Her own chest ached with emotions she had buried for weeks, emotions she had never dared to name. Smith's voice grew softer, tender yet unshakable. "And now," his gaze searched hers, desperate, longing. "I don't want to live without you." Her breath hitched, the weight of his confession overwhelming her. She was just a nurse. He was a billionaire. The world outside would never understand this moment. But in his eyes, she saw no fortune, no power, only truth. Truth that reached her soul, truth that broke down every wall she had built to protect her heart. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her tears spoke for her, glistening as they slid down her cheeks. In that fragile silence, she realized something she had been too afraid to admit. Somewhere between the silent nights, the whispered stories, and the gentle touch of her hands against his skin, she had fallen for him. And now, with his hand holding hers against the warmth of his chest, she knew he had fallen too. The world beyond room 304 did not matter. Titles, wealth, fear, all faded. All that remained was two hearts, trembling but brave enough to confess the truth that had been growing in silence all along. Weeks later, Smith was walking again, stronger every day. One evening, he stood in the hospital garden under the soft glow of white lights. Helen walked toward him, unsure of what to expect. Smith took her hand firmly. "I had money. I had everything society admires. But when I lost it all, only you remained. That's love. That's what matters." Helen's eyes filled with tears. Slowly, he leaned closer, whispering, "Be mine, Helen. Not as my nurse, but as my partner, my future, my everything." She pressed her forehead against his, her voice shaking but sure. "Yes, Smith, I'll stay with you." They embraced, not as billionaire and nurse, but as two souls who had found each other in silence and suffering. The lesson spread quietly, not through headlines, but through hearts. Love is not about wealth, status, or power. It is about seeing a person's soul and choosing to stay when the world walks away. And in that hospital garden, under the soft white lights, two broken hearts became whole. True love doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from patience, kindness, and the courage to see someone's soul beyond society's divisions.